while I was using tokens, I was not really burning anything. So you kind of have to start thinking about tokens as a small thing which represents a larger value. It's like, tokens have been in existence before we started talking about tokens and LLM. You went to a bank and you got a token. You got tokens if you went to a amusement park and you could use it anywhere. So think about tokens like that, and think about your LLM or your AI model as a child, okay? And for the child to understand what you are asking of it, you need to break it up into the smallest meaningful parcels of information.
Recently, I was attending a workshop on research and insights and all of that, and a lot of participants were talking about using Claude for their research. And one question that kept coming up was, what's a token? How is it calculated? Am I wasting my tokens? Especially for those people who were on the free plan or the $20 a month plan. While they'd never seen the word token, everybody felt it, right? Because suddenly in the middle of a conversation, they hit a limit. And now you've got to wait 24 hours before you can get there. Or sometimes, if you were doing work in the middle of the afternoon, the responses started getting slower.
One thing that I read somewhere, very interesting, funny stuff was that essentially you are paying for the model's, existential crisis. Because the model is actually iterating through your prompt and actually trying a couple of things before answering you, and you are paying for everything. So it's like your child and the whole therapy and everything is being paid by you. The bugger is having existential crisis.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Three Techies Banter. Recently, I was attending a workshop on research and insights and all of that, and a lot of participants were talking about using Claude for their research. And one question that kept coming up was, what's a token? How is it calculated? Am I wasting my tokens? Especially for those people who were on the free plan or the $20 a month plan. While they'd never seen the word token, everybody felt it, right? Because suddenly in the middle of a conversation, they hit a limit. And now you've got to wait 24 hours before you can get there. Or sometimes, if you were doing work in the middle of the afternoon, the responses started getting slower. So what we realize is that while the meter is invisible, the wall is really real. And that's when I got down to talking with Samiran and Nilesh and said, hey, listen, a lot of people are very confused about what this token is. And so today's conversation, we're going to break down tokens for you. We're going to be talking about tokens in a simple, practical manner, and hopefully Samiran will have some advice which will help you save some money or at least get something more from your free plan. So that's what we're going to do about tokens, and I'm going to hand over to Samiran. Samiran's written quite a bit on tokens, so I thought I'd ask him to explain what a token is to begin with, as simple as that.
So in fact, my journey to tokens was kind of going to be from the other side, because what I ended up doing is I heard a whole bunch of this stuff about how people are maxing out their tokens, especially companies. So, there was this whole talk about how Microsoft let go of its subscription of Claude, which was not entirely true, but because they had used up all tokens, then Uber had burned through all their tokens in 4 months, of their annual budget. So I said, what the hell is going on? Because while I was using tokens, I was not really burning anything. So you kind of have to start thinking about tokens as a small thing which represents a larger value. It's like, tokens have been in existence before we started talking about tokens and LLM. You went to a bank and you got a token. You got tokens if you went to a amusement park and you could use it anywhere. So think about tokens like that, and think about your LLM or your AI model as a child, okay? And for the child to understand what you are asking of it, you need to break it up into the smallest meaningful parcels of information. And this is where it kind of gets really tricky. So if I ask the LLM, what is my name, or what do you think I did today? So it will break what did you think I did today into literally syllables. So the popular rule of thumb is that, if it is X number of words, then the number of tokens could probably be 1.25 as 1.5, but that becomes more and more complicated as the words increase in complexity. So if you can have a very long English word, then it could become 5 or 6. Like the word tokenization is probably 5 or 6 tokens. So that's the kind of stupidity it is. So that's how it understands it, and that's just the input. And this is again it gets so. If you ask, tell me about the weather today. So that's one token. Now the model will read that and send you back information. So it can say, okay, it is sunny, it's this, partially rain, there could be thunder clouds and blah, blah, all of that. So all that response are tokens. And this is why people are getting where they are. So, you send in 5 tokens, but what you get back could be 200, 300 tokens. So now let's move to the next step. So now you say, what kind of clouds are expected? Are they cumulonimbus? Are they cumulus? Whatever. So that's your question. Now the model loads your first question, their answer, and your second question, because it needs context. You remember that this is kind of it doesn't know what happened before. So the only way it will know is it loads that. And so on and so forth. So now you think about your second question, about your third question, and that keeps on compounding. And that's what results in this whole, what your friends are encountering, that at some point they run out of tokens. Or because each model, each context is like 250,000 tokens is maximum, going up to 1 million, but it's very, very easy to exhaust. And if you add to this, if you're using image, if you're using voice, and if you're using video, then that has a huge, huge compounding effect, and which is what this whole.
So that's very interesting, because when I was reading up on this, it says that your input is whatever token. And it was quite funny because I was reading about it and somebody said, think of it as Lego blocks, right? Little bricks.
Absolutely.
So each word is like a Lego brick. And you have the small bricks and the bigger bricks and all of that. And therefore, each word. So another rule of thumb that I read was 1 token is equal to 3/4 of a word. Okay, that is if the word is a reasonable size word. If you decide to do tokenization and premiumization and, entrepreneurship and all, then it's multiple.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how it works. But I thought the Lego brick version was very easy to understand, because now you know that you're building on it. So you have the base and then you keep building on it. And every time you build, it becomes more and more expensive.
Right, absolutely.
The other interesting thing is that 1 token, so when you are asking the question, the cost is lower. But when it responds, the response is 4.5 or 5 times the cost of the input token, which completely threw me. I mean, I was like, wow, that I didn't expect to happen. So Nilesh, what was your sense on this one?
So when I heard both, and especially about the output part, one thing that I read somewhere, very interesting, funny stuff was that essentially you are paying for the model's, existential crisis, because the model is actually iterating through your prompt and actually trying a couple of things before answering you, and you are paying for everything. So it's like your child and the whole therapy and everything is being paid by you.
Yeah.
The bugger is having existential crisis. But so essentially what Samiran mentioned, and just to put some technical buzzwords around it. So you Sheetal, what you mentioned, since being parents of Lego loving children, that's the most beautiful analogy I could also think of. But essentially, we are talking of something called subvert tokenization, right? At a
Correct.
hierarchical level, you're tokenizers are picking sub words, sometimes the whole word also, if it is understandable. And there are multiple algorithms for subword tokenization, breaking up the words. And I think the most popular is BPE, called byte pair encoding. And essentially, if we take the word tokenization, it might be broken as token, eyes, and shun by the BPE. And it does that basis frequency. So you have civilization, you have various other zations. So it over a period, it understands that shun or ization is frequently appearing, and it breaks it into ization and token, right? And essentially, you build your vocabulary, and when you have reached the requisite size of vocabulary, you stop there, right? And that is your whole vocabulary. I think GPT uses BPE. There are a couple others called Unigram, which works on probability. So this is like, it also breaks, but it does probable words that can go with token. It could be ization, it could be something else, right? So it works on probability, and it breaks. This is the probability of what two words can come together, and again reaches a vocabulary. Then there are word piece, sentence piece. There are 4 or 5 known algorithms. But I have to, when I was reading all this, one thing came to my mind, which I must talk about. Essentially, tokenizers were trained on English models, right?
Oh yeah.
And that is why you pay a lot of tax if you're doing, they call it a kind of something tax, right? Probably Samiran knows that word. When you are doing in your language, right? Like a Hindi or something. So I thought about it, and I said, if I had to tokenize the Hindi for computer engineering, okay, how will I make the machine understand? And computer engineering, for even the people who understand Hindi might not know, is Sanganak Abhiyantriki. So now forget the machine. Even Hindi knowledgeable humans don't understand what Sanganak Abhiyantriki is. And the only way you can break it is in sa, ga, na, ka, b. There is no other mechanism of breaking it. So you are basically going down to the one button size of tile in Lego and trying to make a whole house out of one square tile, smallest possible.
I found the answer to that one. You use servam.ai. Because so while most of the other LLMs are trained on English as the native language, so while you had it on Hindi, I kept thinking about Chinese, because DeepSeek was something that I was reading about and thinking about. And I said, so if on an English language model, if I write in Chinese script, does it become more expensive? And the answer is yes, because of the tax. But interestingly, if on DeepSeek you run it in English, you don't pay as much, because they've taught it on 2 languages, which is English and Chinese, right? So it's quite, and also, of course, DeepSeek is cheaper on its costs anyways compared to a Claude or any other piece.
So, Nilesh, in fact, your point, I was just thinking about this Hindi thing. So, it's not just the alphabet, but think about the Hindi complexity is that there are matras, and that Chandra Bindu and all of that.
See, both of you are going very traditional. That's why you have to write it the way I do. Kaise ho, K-I-S-E-H-O. It reads it like English. If you do that, if you do English and you do phonics, it works.
So the point is, what the Chinese have done with DeepSeek and others, the Queen and whatever else they have, is that each Chinese character actually has meaning, right? By itself, what they call glyphs or whatever. So they have made tokens of each of those. So it's you don't have to break up the word like in English, like syllabally. So each of those, they've kind of trained it. So a Chinese model for Chinese characters is much more efficient and faster than Chinese for English, which is vice versa. It's like, it's basically, it's there, take that version to the English models, because when the English did it, Chinese didn't read it well. And the other thing, Nilesh, is that when we talk about this input output, and to your point of therapy and all that, so we are actually not only paying for therapy, we are paying for the thinking time of the therapist also, which is that reasoning. When you have that thinking coming, thinking is consuming tokens.
Correct.
So which is why you have to then figure out what to use when, because the more you use it, the more it thinks, the more it reasons, the worse it gets. And that is also why models are much more inefficient in arithmetic, because there is no way of recognizing a number string. So each number is a token, and plus minus multiplication, everything is a token. So which is why these models find it more difficult to do math. So yeah, it's okay. And hence, of course, the consumption.
So before we move to our second segment, we've already given you 3 tips, okay? The first is we've told you how tokens get used. The second is that if you're going to do it in Hindi, please use sarvam.ai. Do not use any of the native language, English native language LLMs. And the third is that be careful on how you ask and what you ask. So 3 tips to begin with on segment 1. We're going to take a short break and come back into segment 2. And that, I'm sure Nilesh is going to start off for us.
So now we are back with segment 2. And in segment 2, we thought we talked about what are tokens, generally, in general, what is tokenization? How do machines learn? Mostly in general, they learn by subword tokenization. That was the idea. Now we'll talk quickly about using AI well, kind of, how. So we gave tips, but one must understand the mechanics of what is happening, right? And one of the things is many models boast of context window, right? That we have a large context window, right? And there have been cases where developers used to drop a whole database and their question into the prompt, and forget getting the answer. You have run through all the tokens because the bugger is parsing. and let's say you didn't run out of your tokens, and you thought that now the database is in context. Lo and behold, probably you are still not getting the answers, correct, the perfect answer, let's say. So one of the things, upsides or downsides of context windows, and I thought a very interesting way I read, easy way to understand is, and probably Samiran will enjoy this one, is that if you got a golden retriever to a library full of books, right, and thought that I'm giving all the books to a golden retriever, the retriever will remember only the bone at the start and the ball at the end. In between is all wallpaper. Right? So I found that very interesting, that actually the models also remember your first prompt and the last prompt, and the context in between is lost or hallucinations might happen. So don't go with the fact that there is a huge context window and let me dump anything into the context window. It is like a RAM. The other technical meaning of it would be, it is like a random access memory. So whatever you're talking remains there till the time you shut off and restart, and it is flushed, right? So the context has that kind of meaning. So you have to use AI well. And one of the things that you do is actually you kind of start thinking very much in like a markdown or XML kind of a structure. Right. So now you are trying to not create unwieldy huge sentences or put a lot of parsing logic where a lot of parsing logic will be required. Try to break it down and start thinking in kind of a tag system, right? A markdown language. And you start becoming a bit more efficient in consuming tokens. I mean, that was my bit on using AI well.
No, you're right. See, because it's like anything else, right? I mean, if I ask you a specific question, you will give me a specific answer, If I just ask you, describe in your own words, and then, you go off, then nothing works. So if you were to say that, give me 3 bullet points for this and define the boundary conditions, the tokens used are less, thinking is less, parsing is less, and you are directing the logic to a certain area or your specific area. But the moment you open it up, it just goes crazy. And to your point that there was a study, I think, done by the Anderson Horowitz with these guys called Open Router, where they did an analysis in 2025 of 100 billion or 100 trillion tokens that have been used so far and where they have been used. And one of the things they found is that the size of the prompts has kind of gone up 4-5 times on an average, which means people are just dumping things into it. Earlier, it was just a question, now it is, to your point, people are dumping whole code bases and then saying, debug it for me. And so which is kind of killing people. And I think before we lose track of that, I just want to differentiate a little bit between this consumer and enterprise, which is where, efficiencies and all come in. On the consumer side, it's, if it's free, obviously it has limitations. If you pay $20, you get whatever. But you really don't see the impact of token burning. In the sense, what you see is you compare that to like a buffet, you've kind of paid and you will get all the food. If you start eating too fast, and the kitchen can't cope, they'll slow down. So which means the model just slows down, or they'll tell you, come after 2 hours, come this, I can't do something, blah, blah. So you don't get penalized in money terms, but you have some restrictions on what you can do with that model. But with the moment you move to the enterprise, because they allow you to do caching and they allow you to do kind of volumes and all other stuff, and it's really without unhindered. So there they are charged by the token, and which is why our understanding of tokens becomes important, is that whatever it is, like by million tokens you are charged something, but the consumption is so high that when we did our episode on agentic AI, we talked about how the agent goes and executes an entire process. So you kind of think of that through the lens of tokens now, is that as it is getting executed, everything is consuming tokens. And forget about a live process. Even if a developer is testing that process, just think about what happens, because they're running test cases, they're doing all of. So on the enterprise side, it is, huge. And what the experts are saying is that it is not that you're going to see less use. This is only going to explode, because as the models are improving, more and more use cases are getting kind of eligible for use. So there is this whole thing called Jevons paradox, which says that basically as efficiency improves, actually consumption goes up. It doesn't come down, because now you can, today you couldn't do something, with maybe 10 systems integrated and going outside, but you can do it tomorrow. So all of this is going to increase, which I think will bring more and more focus on the efficiency. I mean, how are you going to make these tokens more efficient? How are you going to rationalize budgets and all of that?
That's interesting because honestly, sorry, go ahead, Nilesh.
No. I since after talking about tokenization, we are saying how to use AI well. Samiran touched upon enterprise, a little bit on personal. On the personal usage stuff for our listeners and viewers, I think that another interesting thing I have seen is keep your prompt shorter, but try, before you start a conversation, try giving your AI a persona. Now, what it says is you are not talking to. It's like if I know that Samiran wears multiple hats, but I say, Samiran, as a expert in finance, can you tell me the underwriting process? Right now, suddenly Samiran's context, he may know multiple things, but now he's thinking in a certain persona, and it reduces it gives a lot of context. It understands persona. So that was an interesting one. And I have started using it, trying to give a persona. When I know my question, I'll try to give it a persona in that domain.
That's interesting because, true. So what we're really saying effectively for our non-enterprise consumers is that keep your chats short and start fresh topics for new chats. Like Nilesh said, right? Yeah, it remembers the first and the last prompt. So if you keep one single chat running through the day, that's going to be very painful. But if you start new fresh chats for every new topic that you want to do, the chances are it'll keep your token usage low and it'll get your responses faster. So that's one, I think, a very interesting thing. The second one that I completely like what you both had mentioned earlier, is you can control what the response is going to be. So if you're smart and say, give me only 3 bullet points, it will give you only 3. But if you let it ramble and don't give it a finite thing, it'll give you 20, 30, 40 bullet points. And then you're going to be paying a hell of a lot more than you were planning to spend on it. So maybe control what output you want. So one is to use user personas like Nilesh said, but the other is, if you want only 3 bullet points, ask only for 3, or say 3 to 5 or whatever, but keep it that. Even things like give me short answers, stuff like that will help you save on tokens. And the other one, which Samiran mentioned in the previous segment, which I forgot in our recap, was that don't turn on the reasoning mode for stupid questions. Okay.
Which is surprising. On the one hand, we are getting attention spans of goldfish, which means we can only retain so much, but we want the AI to pour out all the garbage they want. I mean, who's going to read all of that stuff, And the other thing, Sheetal, that now that we're talking about just quickly on usage, is that, again, we are not married to a model or to this thing. So you have to use what works best for you. So if it's ChatGPT for some general use, then use it. If it's Claude for coding, use that. Grok is useful for certain things. Image, there is something. So which we have tried when we've also talked about image. So just use the appropriate tool and the appropriate model. Just because 4.8 of Claude is open, ready, you don't have to use it, and you don't have to use it in its max mode and all of that stuff, because it's not necessary. So once you calibrate all of that, then you get the most out of the tool, and same practice works in both cases. But even for consumers, you'll run into that wall less often.
What effectively Samiran is saying, have as many girlfriends as you want, just don't get married. In that very convoluted way. That's what he said to you.
This is what question and interpretation does to you. You say something and it goes.
but you were not charged any tokens for this banter.
This is free.
So I think on that interesting banterish note, we'll move to the final segment and talk about token economy, right? What is this token economy? And I think Samiran has some interesting thoughts about a new buzzword that is coming up called FinOps, and I'll let him kind of come back with that in the next section.
So just like when we started with cloud, nobody really understood how cloud worked, and all of a sudden we were hit with these huge bills. And then, people started figuring out, okay, this is how cloud works, this is how consumption works, this is how I need to control, calibrate, configure my systems, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's also going to start happening, or is happening, with the AI LLM world. And again, this is a little more in the enterprise space, not so much in consumers. I think when these models came into being, I think they started with a SaaS model, or they started with licensing, that they said, okay, this is my license, use as much as you want. But very quickly they realized that that's not how the model worked or consumed energy. That's not how GPUs were used. That's not how electricity was used, and all of that. So that's when I think somewhere in 22, 23, I think ChatGPT came out with this token as a model for charging, and that kind of has become the de facto standard, even though tokens means different things in different models, because as Nilesh mentioned, tokenizers are different and all that. But everybody has got used to the fact that a token is a unit of currency, that this is how we will judge consumption. Having said that, we are just learning that tokens behave in a certain way. The consumption is driven by not just query prompt, but how interfacing systems work. Agentic AI is driving it. As you integrate with vendor systems, all of that will start changing. So which is, of course, just like DevOps, it's leading to this whole area of financial discipline called AI FinOps. And and there are a whole bunch of tools out there which are doing this. But at its core is really about keeping a really close watch on the financial bill of your token consumption. And what should I say? Basically, IT cannot work by itself, because ultimately somebody has to pay for this. And because this bill comes with a lag, you get hit by a bill 45 days later and the consumption's already happened and there is no way to rewind it. So every discipline of financial operations that is in the way the practice of it works is that number one, apply the right model for the right work. See that you can batch process something rather than do it in real time. Whatever needs reasoning, which is usually 10% of your work, should be pushed to higher models versus keeping the rest of it to the plain vanilla stuff. And again, use simple prompt engineering discipline that don't load the whole code base, put boundary conditions for your queries, and of course then there's a whole bunch of Meta's got its own dashboard. Claude, all of these people have also got dashboards that kind of report all of this to you on a regular basis. So that is, and like I mentioned earlier, that we are not in the foreseeable future seeing this cost coming down because this is only going to go up. The cost of per token cost has, I think, crashed significantly, but the bills are going up, which just means that adoption is going through the roof.
And I think while you're looking at this from an enterprise perspective, it's only a matter of time when everything will become payable, even from a consumer perspective. Because somewhere these costs have to be recovered and somebody is going to have to pay for it. So even as consumers, I think we need to start taking cognizance of what we want to use the AI for. It can't just be for what should I have for lunch, where should my next holiday be, etc.
But unfortunately, that is what it is the maximum. I was talking about this token analysis.
Correct.
So they're saying the majority, 54, 50, whatever, majority of the percentages in this role play and storytelling is the category they call it, is that people are still talking about general questions. I mean, serious work as a percentage is increasing, but the bulk of the usage because of consumers is this.
But that's my point, that as the world becomes more aware and costs multiply, the consumer is also going to have to pay up.
True,
so if you've gotten used to and you've got spoiled by asking silly questions and getting whatever answers, you cannot just pass off all of your thinking to the LLMs. You've got to do your fundamental thinking before you get onto the LLM and use it efficiently.
It just reminds me of, earlier we were never used to paying for Microsoft Office. It used to all come from somewhere. But very soon, the moment it moved to the cloud, then it was traceable. Now everybody, and so we are not averse to getting a Microsoft license now, right? I mean, everybody is buying it. And you're very true. I mean, that's where this will go, that we will also be metered as consumers also.
Correct. And that's where the discipline today will help. Yeah, Nilesh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, like Samiran correctly mentioned, the discipline might automatically come once it becomes paid and metered. But it has become a nightmare. This AI thing has become a nightmare for CFOs. And literally, it reminded me of one of our episodes. Remember, on IoT, we talked about a meter sending SMSs to the central server versus a man walking down and actually taking a meter reading was cheaper in India, right?
Correct.
So I read an article, literally, they did some analysis, and one prompt with one conversation with a chatbot was costing about 50 cents. And the CFO will say, if I can do that at 40 cents with an offshore human on the phone, why will I need a chatbot, right? So the whole idea is that the finance behind it will create both new use cases. I mean, we are worried about, everyone's jobs are taken, but it's not cheap.
No.
It's not at all cheap. Human doing it is still cheaper in certain use cases. So new use cases will emerge while a lot of efficiency will be driven. A very interesting thing I read, I mean, maybe from, taking cue from FinOps and finances behind it, there are now going to be proxy AI proxy gateways. So if you remember, in good old days, when your internet, you had a proxy, which was a modem, right? All the traffic used to go through the proxy. So if you have a modem in your house and 10 people are connected, your kids, your parents, everything is going through a proxy, and the proxy is deciding how to route your traffic and what to do with it. Especially if you had kids, it could put parental guidance. So now AI will go through proxy gateways where you will put metering, you'll put the required walls, speed, and reuse. So the proxies will get interesting that if 10 developers are asking the same if then else loop, just send one query and get the code for that and reuse that code across. So that was very interesting that some very new probably devices or software will come into being, which will act as gateways and proxies for your all your AI queries doing the metering. And many of the use cases will go back to humans because it's cheaper to do it.
Right. See, in fact, this is the whole productivity problem, right? We are getting AI in and we are letting people go because you think it will do faster. But with our lovely friend tokens, if you consume it at that pace, then you will be spending more on tokens than you would spend on the human. So, I mean, obviously there has to be some balance, because we've like swung from, okay, we'll put humans and offshore. Now everything will be AI. But now you're suddenly realizing that now AI is becoming so good that you're spending more and more on it.
Correct.
And it's becoming more than the human. So then bye-bye efficiency. I mean.
So on that happy note where the fear that AI is going to take away all our jobs, the fact that we may just all have our jobs back because AI is too expensive, we'll conclude today's conversation on tokens. We hope that you thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. If you like conversations like this, let us know which other topics you would want us to talk about. We'll see you soon on our next episode.